Today's session felt like a roast, minus the jokes. I'm Ethan Blake, and dignity was the first casualty of this never-ending policy bloodbath.
So the yeas are 47, the nays are 53. The motion is not agreed to.
Mr. President.
The senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, we just spent 13 hours doing motions.
Does the senator want to call up his amendment?
Mr. President, I call up my amendment 2772 and ask that it be reported by number.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Louisiana, Mr. Kennedy, proposes an amendment number 2772 to amendment number 2360.
Mr. President, we just spent 13 hours on motions to commit. I'm not blaming my Democratic colleagues because we had to agree to it. But anybody with a brain above a single-cell organism knows that a motion to commit has no chance of passing. So basically, we've been standing around for 13 hours. We might as well have just been standing around sucking on our teeth. Now, I'd like to ask for order in this chamber. At least we can have that.
There'll be order, please.
Mr. President, in this bill, $1 billion is set aside to be spent by September 30th, 2027 to carry out the Defense Production Act. That's it. That's all there is. Now, I'm not a big fan of government-directed industrialization. Government-directed industrialization is when government, with its superior instincts and infallible judgment, decides to pick winners and losers in the private sector. This business gets some money, but you, Ms. Businesswoman, you can't have the money. I'm against that for two reasons. Number one, it's immoral. It's unfair to people who don't get the money, the gift from government. And number two, when government does it, when it picks winners and losers. Now, I was against it in the prior administration. And just recently in my committee, subcommittee, we had a hearing where the prior administration handed out $90 billion in the last 76 days of its administration in gifts and loans to entities in the private sector. And I raised fresh hell. And now we're about to do it again. $1 billion. Now and that's all it says, $1 billion to be spent, period. Now, I have been told that the Secretary of Energy and the Secretary of the Interior are going to decide in their unfettered discretion who's going to get this money in the private sector. And they are both two good men. I know that both of those secretaries, I voted for them. They are total ballers. I love them to death. But when I'm in Washington, I live by this adage: trust in God, but tie up your camel. Trust in God, but tie up your camel. This bill will say they can give these gifts and grants to whomever they want, but Congress has to approve it. Now, about, an hour ago, I got a call from one of my supporters, Mr. President. And you know what he said to me? He said, Kennedy, for your own good, you need to pull down this amendment. You have to pull down this amendment. Kennedy, for your own good, you have to pull down this amendment. And you know what I told him, Mr. President? I said, Scooter, there are only two things I have to do in this world: be cool and die. And I'm not pulling down this amendment. It wasn't right when it was done in the prior administration. It's not right now that we're in charge. This is Congress's job, and by God, we ought to do it, and I reserve my time.
The senator from Vermont.
All right. I support the Kennedy Amendment, but not for the reasons my friend from Louisiana does. I think that there should be some flexibility and there should be some governmental policy that helps our industry. And I do agree that the president should have some power. What I don't believe, what I do not believe, is that the Congress should be powerless. And that's what we have become, ceding our Article I authority to a chief executive, and I don't care whether it's a Republican or Democrat. The most important branch is the Article I branch because we are the closest to the people. And how is it that we have in this bill $1 billion that goes to an executive to be spent in ways we have no input as to how it will be spent? We have no accountability. We have no way to tell the people we represent how money is being spent and why. Mr. President, I believe that the biggest threat we have to this democracy is the failure of this Congress to assert its authority and accept its responsibility to make the decisions that the Constitution says is our obligation to do, and that starts with the power of the purse. I support the man from Louisiana and his amendment. I yield the floor.
Mr. President, how much time do I have? Mr. President, I understand my esteemed colleague and I
Okay. The senator from Louisiana has 30 seconds, and the senator from South Carolina has 4 minutes.
Thank you, Scooter. I'm Mr. President. Mr. President, I appreciate my colleague's support. I don't mean any disrespect to anybody. But this town operates on two wrongs, don't make it right, but they do make it even. It's time that Congress have a say in how the money's being spent. And this doesn't say the money can't be spent. It just says Congress gets to approve it.
Mr. President, I really like my good friend from the great state of Louisiana. And Scooter's cousin Bubba called me recently. And I got to tell you that there's no doubt in my mind that the importance of the Defense Production Act is undeniable. And specificity is a necessary component for us to have our oversight. And that is why this administration, unlike the last administration, has committed to making sure that we understand how the resources in the DPA will be spent. We have that commitment on a quarterly basis to receive the necessary information so that we understand with great clarity and transparency how the dollars within the DPA will be spent. But here's what we also know, that we remain reliant on China for critical minerals. Here's what we know, that the United States of America, the city on the hill, remains dependent on foreign powers for our necessary resources. We are not self-reliant in areas that matter the most to the American people and, frankly, to America's future. Now, you can think of this as just hyperbole, but the fact of the matter is clear when you look back to recent issues like COVID and PPE. We were begging China to help the American people, Mr. President. We were begging China for medicine, masks. We cannot allow this great nation to be dependent on other nations. We must become more self-reliant. And in the spirit of self-reliance, this administration, whom I will say, I trust President Trump. I trust his word to produce the results we need for this nation, to make sure that we are self-reliant, and I trust the president to produce the information that will satisfy my good friend, Senator Kennedy. But let me close with this. We need the DPA, and we need the funding at the levels requested. We must make sure we always have the resources to produce for ourselves if there's another COVID. In the same way that we use the DPA to build levees and flood walls after Hurricane Katrina, we need to make sure we have the resources in place for natural emergencies. In the same way that the DPA was used to help protect service members who were deployed overseas from IEDs, We need the DPA. So, Mr. President, I ask my colleagues to vote no on this amendment. The pending amendment does not produce a change in outlays of revenues. I raise a point of order under Section 313B1A of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974.
The Senator for Louisiana. Take your time.
Thank you, sir. Pursuant to Section 904 of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974, I move to waive the point of order, reminding the body that I'm not striking the spending, I'm just asking Congress to approve it. And I ask for the ayes and nays.
Is there sufficient second? There appears to be. The court will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks. Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Banks. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Mr. Booker. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Britt. Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin. Miss Ernst.
Are you kidding me? That was one of the most absurd, exhausting, and enlightening 13 hours the Senate has ever wasted. And leave it to Senator John Kennedy to walk up, pop the balloon of political nonsense, and drop a truth grenade right into the chamber. This isn't just another amendment. It's a full-blown indictment of how recklessly this town handles your tax dollars. And it's about damn time someone said it with clarity. Let me break it down for you. After 13 hours of procedural games, Kennedy takes the floor and says what every working American is thinking. We just stood around sucking on our teeth. You think that's colorful? It's brutally accurate. They weren't solving problems. They were playing parliamentary games to stall real accountability. But Kennedy wasn't having it. He went straight to the heart of the matter. A $1 billion slush fund buried in the bill to be spent under the Defense Production Act. No restrictions, no oversight, just a blank check to Biden's administration, specifically to the Secretary of Energy and the Secretary of the Interior, to funnel to whoever they want. And you know what Kennedy said? He said, hell no. He's not against the DPA. He's not even trying to strip the funding. He just wants one simple thing. Let Congress have a say before the money is handed out like candy on Halloween. That's it. It's basic. It's constitutional. But apparently for this White House and their enablers in Congress, that's too much to ask. And then it gets even better. Someone calls Kennedy, presumably a friend, a donor, a GOP insider, and says, Senny, for your own good, pull the amendment. And what does Kennedy say? Scooter, there are only two things I have to do in this world. Be cool and die. That's MAGA energy right there. That's the spirit of the grassroots rebellion we've been screaming for since 2016. He's not backing down. He doesn't care who's in power. Trump, Biden, Reagan's ghost. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Kennedy isn't here to be popular. He's here to be honest. Now let's talk about what came next, because this is where the so-called bipartisanship got real interesting. A senator from Vermont steps up and supports the amendment, but not for the same reason. He's not MAGA. He still wants flexibility. But even he admits Congress has turned into a bunch of spectators, handing the power of the purse to the executive branch, and then wondering why the country's burning through cash like a spoiled lottery winner. He literally says the biggest threat to democracy is Congress refusing to assert its constitutional authority. And you know what? He's right. If Congress won't stand up and reclaim its role, regardless of who's president, then it's not a republic anymore. It's a monarchy with bureaucrats. But back to Kennedy. He's not trying to burn the DPA. He's trying to tighten the screws, make sure no president, not even Trump, gets to dish out billions without the American people having a voice through their representatives. That's conservative. That's constitutional. That's American. Then enters another voice, the senator from South Carolina. And this guy tries to play both sides. On one hand, he praises Trump, says he trusts him to use the DPA wisely. On the other hand, he asks the chamber to vote against the Kennedy Amendment. Why? Because this administration supposedly gives quarterly reports. Quarterly reports? Are you joking? That's not oversight. That's a PR schedule. We're supposed to feel secure knowing that $1 billion is being doled out by faceless bureaucrats just because there's a spreadsheet somewhere in the Energy Department? Please. And let's not ignore the hypocrisy. This same Defense Production Act that was once used to build levees after Katrina, that was once used to shield our troops from IEDs overseas, is now being turned into a political slush fund for green energy cronies and corporate giveaways. And when Kennedy calls it out, they try to shut him down with technicalities, but Kennedy doesn't flinch. He reminds them, and us, that he's not striking the spending. He's just asking that Congress approve it. He's saying, fine, spend the money, but let's vote on it. Let's stand behind it. Let's own it. And if that's too much for this Senate, then we've got a bigger problem than just this amendment. We've got a system where unelected staffers and career bureaucrats wield more power than the people's elected representatives. We've got a Congress that's lost its spine. That's why Kennedy stood tall. That's why he didn't blink. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about Scooter, Bubba, or even Trump. It's about restoring honest, accountable governance in a town that's forgotten what those words even mean. So when they roll the vote, remember this. Kennedy didn't fold. He didn't compromise. He stood up. He planted his boots in the marble floor of the Senate and said, You don't get to throw away $1 billion without asking the people first. And that, my friends, is the kind of leadership America's been starving for. Let's bring more of it.